this hearing to order. The reason why we're here, I think we all know that, but for the record, is for a candidate challenge to the candidacy of Mr. Ron Haven. And each person that testifies today must announce their name before comment for the recording purposes. And I will remind all that testify that you will be sworn into oath before testifying. Just for the record, I want to go over the notice of the hearing to make sure that all parties that were to be notified were done so correctly. This panel, speaking of the Board of Elections, shall give notice of the hearing to the challenger, to the candidates, other candidates filing or petitioning to be elected to the same office, to the county chair of each political party in every county in the district for this office, and to those persons who have requested to be notified. Each person shall be given notice, shall also be given a copy of the challenge or a summary of its allegations. Is there any discrepancy in that notice? Okay. At this time, I will read through the challenge so that all are aware of all the criteria and so forth that goes along with that. And the voter challenge will not be addressed today. That is a separate process, so I just wanted to make that clear to all that are involved. But that proceeding will take place at a later date from today. So just bear with me as we go through this challenge. It's quite a bit of reading, but we'll get through it. Mr. Charles V. NIchols, the challenger, being a qualified voter in the Macon County Commissioner District 2 and duly sworn, hereby files this challenge to the declared candidacy of Ronald M. Haven for Macon County Commissioner of District 2, and make that challenge not only as to the qualifications of Ronald M. Haven as a candidate of the 2nd District Commissioner race, but also challenge Ronald M. Haven's qualification as a voter in the precinct of South Franklin, City of Franklin, as follows. And as I spoke before, this hearing today will just be to the qualifications as a candidate. North Carolina Statute 163, Article 11B establishes the provision to file a challenge to the candidacy. North Carolina General Statute 153A-12 states that, except as otherwise directed by law, each power, right, duty, function, privilege, and immunity of the corporation, i.e. the county, shall be exercised by the Board of Commissioners. The Macon County Board of Commissioners on September 20th, 1976 passed a resolution, RE modification in the structure of the Board of Commissioners of Macon County, stating in Article B, Section 2, quote, members of the Board of Commissioners shall be nominated for each electoral district seat by the qualified voters of the county as a whole, and nominees for each seat shall reside within the district for which they are nominated. Point 4. Based on reasonable suspicion and belief, Ronald M. Haven does not meet the constitutional or statutory qualifications for the office of Macon County Commissioner District 2, including residency, by the way of illustration and not limited to. Point A. Macon County Board of Elections voter information records show Ronald M. Haven claimed residency as a qualified voter of Macon County Commissioner District 2 at the address 433 East Palmer Street, Franklin, North Carolina, 28734. Point B. The Macon County Register of Deeds office shows this address to be owned by Cartuga J Investments, LLC, with the physical address of the property being 423 East Palmer Street, Franklin, North Carolina, 28734. Point C. The Macon County Tax Department shows the address of 423 East Palmer Street, Franklin, North Carolina, 28734, to be registered under the name of Cartuga J Investments, LLC. Point B, the address 433 East Palmer Street, Franklin, North Carolina 28734 is the physical address of the Havens Motel office. Point E, according to the North Carolina Department of the Secretary of State's office, Cartuga J Investments LLC is a legally recognized limited liability company effective July 10, 2008. This date is prior to Ronald M. Havens' first election to the County Commission representing District 2. Point F, according to the North Carolina Department of the Secretary of State's office, Ronald M. Haven is a registered agent for Cartuga J Investments LLC. The office address of Cartuga J Investments LLC is 98-30 Mill Creek Road, Franklin, North Carolina 28734. Point G, according to the North Carolina Department of the Secretary of State's office, Ronald Haven is the manager of Cartuga J Investments LLC. Marcella Haven is listed as a member. The business address for the two company officials is listed at 750 Mill Creek Road, Franklin, North Carolina 28734. Point H, within the telephone directory, Ronald M. Haven is listed to live at 750 Mill Creek Road, Franklin, North Carolina 28734. Point 5, undersigned petitioners hereby request that the Macon County Board of Elections undertake a full and complete evidentiary hearing, including the issuance of subpoenas for documentary evidence and witness testimony, and at the conclusion of which, enter an order and determination that Ronald M. Haven is not qualified candidate for the Macon County Board of Commissioners, District 2, in that he does not meet the requirements of that office. Subpoenas for documentary evidence should include, but are not limited to. Point A.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes, sir.
The candidate is willing to stipulate as to points A through S of the things, of the incredible multitude of things that were requested, and without objection would waive the reading of all of those points, and would further acknowledge that the chairman issued a subpoena for the self-same things that are listed in the petition, and to the best of Mr. Haven's ability, he has brought those things in those boxes over there.
Okay. Do we have any objections from the challenger?
No, I do not.
Okay, so that since we have an agreement on there, we will pass the reading of the rest of these points and move on to the function of the hearing. At this point, I'd like to ask if there are any stipulations of fact by the parties to the following points. Point A, the Macon County Board of Elections received a challenge to Mr. Haven's candidacy on 3rd of March 2014. North Carolina General Statute 163-127.2a stipulates that a challenge must be received no later than 10 days after the closing of the filing period for notice of that candidacy. Do the parties hereunto stipulate and agree that the close of filing established by the State Board of Elections for the office in question in this challenge was at noon, February 28, 2014, and do both parties stipulate and agree that the challenge was filed within the appropriate time limits and specifically on March 3rd, 2014?
The candidate so stipulates.
Challenger so stipulates.
Point B, North Carolina General Statute 163-127.13 stipulates that the challenger may be, quote, any qualified voter registered in the same district as the office for which the candidate has filed or petitioned. Do the parties stipulate that?
Mr. Nichols, are you a resident of Franklin?
District 2, 395 Court Street, Franklin, NC, which is part of District 2, and also South Franklin Precinct.
We will.
Point of order. I think we probably need to swear the witness.
Well, this is
Point C, Mr. Charles V. Nichols is the named challenger in this challenge. He has stated in his challenge that his address is 395 Porter Street, Franklin, North Carolina, 28734. He further states in his challenge that he is a qualified voter in the Macon County Commissioner District 2. Do the parties hereunto stipulate and agree that Mr. Charles V. Nichols, the named challenger, is a qualified voter registered in the same district as to the office which Ronald Marion Haven has filed for petition, which is District 2, Macon County? I think we've done that.
Mr. Nichols, is that true?
Yes, it is.
The candidate takes his word for it and so stipulates.
Point D. Statute 163-127.31 states that, quote, upon filing of a challenge, a panel shall hear the challenge as follows. Single county, that would be if the district for the office subject to the challenge covers territory in all or part of only one county. The panel shall be the County Board of Elections of that county. The Macon County Board of Elections consists of Mr. Luke Bateman, Chairman, Ms. Sarah Waldrew, Secretary, and Mr. Gary D. Dills, Member. Do both parties stipulate that the Macon County Board of Election is the correct panel to hear this challenge? Do both parties stipulate that the Macon County Board of Elections consists of Mr. Bateman, Mrs. Waldrew, and Mr. Dills? And do the parties stipulate and agree that Ronald Marion Haven has filed as a candidate for the Macon County Commissioner District 2 in the 2004 election cycle?
So stipulate.
The candidate so stipulates.
Point E. The chair reminds all present of the provisions of North Carolina General Statute 163-127.5, which states the burden of proof. The burden of proof shall be upon the candidate, who must show by a preponderance of the evidence of the record as a whole that he or she is qualified to be a candidate of the office. If the challenge is based upon a question of residency, the candidate must show all of the following. 1, an actual abandonment of the first domicile coupled with intent not to return to the first domicile. 2, the acquisition of a new domicile by actual residence at another place. And point 3, the intent of making the newer domicile a permanent domicile.
Yes, sir, that's what the statute says.
Okay. All right, at this point, we'll state that the challenger requested subpoenaing of several documents relating to the challenge. A copy of that subpoena is available if the challenger or candidate wishes one. And I think you guys have copies of that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. At this time, the secretary will be giving the oath to the candidate, and I'm going to ask Mr. Haven to...
Mr. Bateman, may I suggest another stipulation?
Okay.
This is a stipulation that Mr. Jones and I discussed yesterday. And the stipulation would be that for purposes of this hearing, all references to Mill Creek refer to the house owned by Mr. Haven and his wife that's located in Cartooja Township in District 3. So that when the words Mill Creek are used, that everybody understands that's what we're talking about without having to go into a bunch of detail. So Mill Creek means District 3. Would you so stipulate?
What's the physical address at Mill Creek? Nothing numerical?
It's 750 Mill Creek Road. 750 Mill Creek Road.
Right.
All right. Would you further stipulate, Mr. Nichols, as the testimony unfolds, that references to Franklin mean the town of Franklin and all places within the town of Franklin, and that the town of Franklin and its city limits are wholly within District 2?
the best of my knowledge, so stipulate.
And the candidate would stipulate that, and I think that is just, that's what Mr. Jones and I discussed. I think that's just for ease of making the record comprehensible.
Is this panel in agreement with that? Yes. Okay. Okay. A couple more things first. A couple more stipulations that we need to address. First of all, just to make sure, do the parties stipulate and agree that the close of filing established by statute and the State Board of Elections for this office and challenge is February 28, 2014, which I think we have done that so far. Do the parties stipulate and agree that Ronald M. Marion Haven, has timely filed for the candidate of Commissioner District 2 in Macon County for this election cycle? And I think we've both agreed to that. Do the parties stipulate that and agree that Charles V. NIchols is qualified voter, which we have stipulated that? Do the parties stipulate and agree that Charles V. NIchols is agree that the challenge of Mr. NIchols to the candidacy of Mr. Haven was filed within the time period, which we have done that? Do the parties stipulate and agree that this board is comprised of myself, Gary, and Sarah, and we've done that? Do the parties stipulate and agree that proper notice has been given of this hearing, and we've done that? I think we're good on the rest of these points here, and we're ready for the oath at this time.
Mr. Bateman and Mr. Jones, are you suggesting that perhaps we stipulate that the only question and issue here today is Mr. Haven's place of residence for purposes of the statute, which is GS 163 at 2nd?
Mr. Chairman, I do believe it's appropriate to confirm with the challenger the full extent of his challenge. As I have read the challenge, I understand it to be limited to residency, but I think we should clarify that for the record.
Okay. So at this point, do we need to swear in?
You're asking
Well,
for
I
an
think we
additional
just asked
stipulation.
Mr. NIchols if he's so stipulated.
Stipulates.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, the candidate will stipulate that. That's right.
Okay. Very good. Now we're ready. Swear.
That's right.
So if you put your hands on the Bible.
The state board would be very thankful for those stipulations.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give to this committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Mr. Chairman, could I ask the people running the recording machine, if something isn't picked up, please let us know so we can restate that?
I will.
Let me encourage all that are testifying to speak up just as loudly as you can so that we can make sure that these voices are picked up on the recording device.
Mr. Bateman, may I question Mr. Haven with his prepared testimony, and I think that might expedite the process.
Yes, sir.
So the board can question him.
Yes. That would be in agreement with us.
Would you wish for me to proceed?
Yes, we're ready to proceed at this
My
time.
name is Orville Cowell Jr. I'm an attorney here at Franklin representing Ronald M. Haven in this proceeding. And state your name, please.
Ronald M. Haven,
Where do you live, Mr. Haven?
433 Palmer Street. 433 East Palmer Street,
In what town?
in Franklin, North Carolina, District 2.
Do you own are you married?
Yes, sir.
What is your wife's name?
Marcella Luna Haven,
Spell that for the record.
Maricela, and middle name Luna.
And pronounce that Marcella.
Maricela.
Do you and Marcella own a house at 750 Mill Creek Road, Franklin, North Carolina?
Yes.
Now, when did you buy the house?
1993.
Do you all also own entities that own the Sapphire Inn?
Yes.
And with a partner, did you own the Franklin Motel?
Yes,
And I believe you own another motel in Georgia.
yes,
Yeah, that's 4 motels in all.
yes.
Is the name of the LLC that owns the Budget Inn Cartucci Investments LLC?
Excuse me.
Is the name of the LLC that owns the Budget Inn in Franklin Cartucci Investments
Yes,
LLC?
yes,
And is that LLC owned by you and Marcella?
yes.
And the Franklin Inn, when you owned it, excuse me, the Franklin Motel, when you owned it, it was owned by another LLC that you owned the half interest in, is that correct?
Right,
And it was also in Franklin, North Carolina,
yes,
and it's not there anymore, is that correct?
correct.
Now, calling your attention to the period of time 2003 through September of 2009, where was your domicile and residence at that time, Mr. Hayden?
I resided at Budget Inn in Franklin at 433 East Palmer Street.
And describe to the board what kind of quarters you have at Budget Inn that you live in.
There's some apartment in the living quarters at Budget Inn, and I live in an apartment right next to the office.
How many apartments are in the Budget Inn?
There are 4.
There are 4 apartments. Are there also motel rooms in that inn?
They are.
Which, are those distinct from the apartments that are in the Budget Inn?
There's 2 different buildings, and there's one I have for nightly rentals, and there's one that I have for weekly rentals.
And the one that has the weekly rentals, are those apartments?
Yes,
Are the apartments larger than motel rooms?
yes,
Are they designed for occupancy by a family or several people at the same time?
they are.
And you lived there at the Budget Inn, what period of time?
In 2003 when it was purchased until September 2009 when we bought the Franklin Motel.
And when you bought the Franklin Motel, did you buy it on or about September of 2009?
Right.
And where did you move out, when you moved out of the Budget Inn? Where did you move to?
To the Franklin Motel at 17 West Palmer Street in Franklin, North Carolina, District 2.
And how long did you live in the Franklin Motel?
Till April 2011.
And why did you move out of the Franklin Motel in April of 2011?
It was disposed of.
Did you deed it to Macon Bank
We did.
when you had to move out of it?
Right.
Would you please describe the type of quarters that you occupied and lived in the Franklin Motel from September 2009 through April 2011?
It was a 3-bedroom apartment.
When you first filed to run for county commissioner, when was that?
In 2010.
That would have been on or about February 2010.
Yes,
And at the time, were you residing in the Franklin Motel?
I was.
Is that where your domicile was at the time?
It was.
And did your entire family live with you in the Franklin Motel?
They did.
Were the quarters large enough for your entire family?
Yes,
Are the quarters at the Budget Inn comfortably large enough for your entire family?
no, it's 1 bedroom.
I believe you have teenage sons,
I do.
in addition to Marcella? Prior to the time you moved into the Franklin Motel in September 2009, when you were living in the Budget Inn, where did Marcella and your sons live?
At Mill Creek.
So your wife maintained one residence and you maintained another residence?
That's correct.
After you conveyed away the Franklin Motel in April of 2011, where did you move then, Mr. Haven?
To the Budget Inn.
Did you move back into the same apartment that you lived in from 2003 through September 2009?
Yes.
And that's the apartment in the Budget Inn that's next door to the office of the Budget Inn?
Yes.
And where, when you and your family moved out of this is April 2011, the Franklin Motel, where did Marcella and your sons move to?
Back to Mill Creek.
And did you move to Mill Creek with them?
No.
And do you still reside in the Budget Inn?
Yes.
Calling your attention to the year 2013, by way of example, and most recent example, would you please tell me, Mr. Haven, I'm simply going to ask you where you spent the night, to the best of your recollection, where you laid your head each night during the year 2013. Would you please tell the board?
I spent about 100 nights on the road promoting gun shows and participating in gun shows or other trade show events. I spend about, on the average, about 45 days through the summer traveling with my wife and children, and around Christmas time I've spent approximately 2 weeks in California. I probably have spent, on a very high-end estimation, with respect to Mr. NIchols, about 45 days out of the year in Mill Creek.
Nights.
Nights, I'm sorry. And
Let me stop you there for a second. The 45, you estimated that on the high end, you spent 45 nights in the house at Mill Creek during 2013, is that correct?
yes,
Why did you pick the number 45?
well, it's probably a lot more than a statement. I don't want to. Being a commissioner, I have found times that if I said something was 200 and 198, it was a big question. So I've tried to make sure that I give a fair example.
Does the 45 days give the benefit of the doubt to the challenger?
It would, in my opinion.
And the 100 nights estimate that you spent on the road doing gun shows, is doing gun shows one of your occupations? And briefly, you said you spent 45 days on the road in the summer of 2013 with your family. To very briefly tell the board what that's all about.
I've got children in early college that in my past career I've traveled a lot, and I took these children to visit historical sites from the East Coast to the West and from the North to the South. I did that for several years, and I think, as maybe you're aware, you saw on Facebook where we put a lot of pictures taken to presidential sites and historical sites and places like the Statue of Liberty and Mount Rushmore and things such as this.
So anyway, you really get on the road with the boys, and you're gone for 45 nights during the summer. All right. 45 days in the summer with the kids and 40, and outside of 45 days at Mill Creek, how many days does that leave?
About 160.
And where did you spend those nights? Where did you lay your head those nights during 2013?
I stayed at the Budget Inn with the exception of special events at other motels where I would stay to either promote those events or
Which other motel?
the Sapphire Inn, for more example, is like when we have the hiker convention. I have a house on First Street
In Franklin?
in Franklin Township, which is behind.
In the town of Franklin?
The town of Franklin.
Thank you.
And I stay there where I'm right next to what's going on with the hiker festivals. And I also have one in December that I stay in Hiawassee, Georgia, for the southbound hikers. So
the 160 days, where were you mostly? Where'd you lay your head mostly?
in
In your apartment?
the apartment.
Now, did you close the motel part of the Budget Inn winter 2013 and 14?
I did.
Did that mean you weren't living there?
No,
Well, address that. Were you living there?
I was.
But the motel was closed to the public,
Right.
and the sign was visible to every single resident of Franklin. Yes.
I put a sign out front closed for season.
That might lead someone to believe the whole place was closed down. Ronnie, Haven, explain to the board why you live in Franklin and Marcella lives at Mill Creek.
I've lived all my life in town. And,
Were you born here?
yes, and I've done many a business and run right in town. And
Town meets Franklin?
the town is Franklin, and I've lived in town. And I have tried to the best of my knowledge to be where I have hands-on contact at all times with my businesses. My wife chooses to live in Mill Creek because she likes the environment there. But I enjoy living in town, and I have stayed in Franklin, in the township, as much as I could in all my life.
In your apartment in the Budget Inn, well, where do you keep your clothes?
Budget Inn,
Where do you keep your toiletry articles?
Budget Inn,
Is there cooking facilities in your apartment in the Budget Inn?
yes,
You ever cooked there?
I have. Gonna ask something like that.
What did you ask, Mr. Dillon?
I'm sorry, Mr. Jones. I'm asking him if you were able to eat it.
I'm going to show you what I have marked as candidates exhibit 1. And I'm also going to show you what I've marked as candidates exhibit 2. Which consists of 3 pages, so I'm going to say candidates exhibit 2A, candidates exhibit 2B, and candidates exhibit 2C. I'm going to ask you, is candidates exhibit 1 a copy of your driver's license?
Yes,
When was it issued,
2012,
and what address does it show?
431 Palmer, East Palmer Street.
I'm going to show you candidate exhibit 2, which consists of A, B, and C. Are these your voting records that you pulled from the Board of Elections?
Yes,
And do they show your place of residence as variously 17 West Palmer Street, Franklin, and 433 East Palmer Street, Franklin?
Yes.
Which would be the Franklin Hotel and the Budget Inn.
yes.
Where do you go to church, Mr. Hayden?
I go to Catholic Church with my wife, which is District 1. I'm in District 2.
Is it in Franklin? We've stipulated that every time you say Franklin, it means District 2.
Okay.
That's why I did that, so you can just say Franklin.
Apartment number, that's ABC.
Howard, are those being offered into evidence at this time?
Yes, Mr. Jones, Mr. County Attorney, we would at this point offer those into evidence.
That's for you, or
Okay.
Thank you.
Exhibit 1, 2A, 2B, and 2C will be entered in as evidence.
Now, Mr. Haven, what is your you testified that your occupation is running motels and gun shows, and I believe you have various rental houses and apartments.
Yes,
Is that correct?
yes,
And I believe you trade and traffic in real estate and other things, don't you?
yes,
So do you get a lot of mail,
yes,
business mail?
yes,
And do you also receive a lot of invoices that you have to pay?
I do,
And do you send out checks?
yes.
Where is your office located?
In Mill Creek,
Who is your secretary?
my wife,
Marcella is your secretary? Does she have a home office at Mill Creek?
yes,
And does a lot of your mail therefore go to Mill Creek?
yes,
And with reference to tax returns and insurance policies and bills that go to the motels and power bills and water bills, although they might be attributable to places in Franklin or Georgia, do they mostly all go to Mill Creek?
yes,
Because that's where your office is?
yes,
And because your office is in a house in Mill Creek, does that mean you live there?
no,
I believe you testified that you go to church at the Catholic Church in Franklin.
yes,
Mr. Haven, if you were not engaged in the businesses you were engaged in, do you have any intention to return to the house at Mill Creek?
no,
Do you consider it your permanent home?
no,
Your family lived in, which was at the Franklin Motel, I presume you have no intention to return to that either, right? It's gone, right? And I'll ask this question with some trepidation. But for purposes of marital law, divorce law, for only those purposes, are you and Marcella separated?
No.
Which has nothing to do with where you and she live, correct?
Right.
No further questions?
Thank you.
Yes, Councilman.
At this time, I would like to ask challenger if he desires to testify or provide any evidence.
No. Sorry.
No, I don't provide any more evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Okay.
Mr. Bateman, although I said that I have no further questions for Mr. Haven, I would like to call another witness.
Okay, that's in order at this time.
Yes, sir, I'm sorry. At this time?
Yes.
I would like to call Charles Nichols as a witness.
You swear. You need to come up here. Take your oath, Mr. Nichols.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give to this committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Mr. Nichols, you might want to move your chair over here and just say you get up and try to lean into the mic so we can.
Why don't we do this, Mr. Haven? Why don't you stand up and let Mr. Nichols come use this mic?
Okay.
Mr. Nichols, state your name, please.
Charles Nichols.
Now, are you the challenger in this proceeding?
I am.
And I'm going to hand you what has been designated as the challenge to candidacy. Are you familiar with that document?
I am.
Did you sign it?
I did.
And did you take an oath and swear to the contents of it?
To the best of my knowledge and ability, yes, I did.
Well, I believe it just says you swore to it. I don't believe it says to the best of your knowledge. But yes, I guess it does. That's fair. Mr. Nichols, did you prepare that document?
No, I did not.
Who prepared that document?
Some friends and people that have done some research.
And what are their names? You have to speak up into the microphone. What are the names of the people that prepared that document?
Why is that relevant?
Need to answer the question.
I think Mr. Cowler are you examining him as an adverse witness?
Yes, sir.
As an adverse witness, I think he has the ability to cross-examine him and probe into these sorts of matters.
Would you proceed to answer the question?
I had
You're on the road.
several people talk to Mr. Corey Duval provided some of the research information, and I don't know who is the photo evidence that I was presented to verify some of the information, but that was primarily it.
Mr. Corey, so your testimony is that the only person that helped you with it was Corey Duval?
Yeah, as far as he actually compiled it and did
where,
the research.
where did you get the template of the document you used? The form of the document.
I think that came from the Board of Elections. I'm not sure.
He was given the statute regarding how to file a challenge.
State your name.
Debbie George, interim director of Macon County Board of Elections. Mr. Duval asked if there was a form for the candidate challenge, and it says a verified affidavit in the statute, it was given the statute. He did state that he had researched it on the internet and had some examples.
So, Ms. George, you did not provide the form
No, I didn't.
or the template.
No.
So, Mr. Nichols, do you know who actually prepared the document?
I do.
You do not know who actually prepared the document that you signed? No. No further questions? That would be all from the candidate.
Okay. All right, at this time, I'll present opportunity for this panel to ask any questions. Okay, since he has closed, Mr. Haven has closed their line of questioning. I'll ask the challenger if he has any further statements or testimony to give this time.
None at this time.
Okay, at this point, open up for questioning of Mr. Haven by this panel.
Yeah, on the registration application form.
Section H,
I'm Sarah Walter, board member of the County Board of Elections. On the North Carolina voter registration application, there's no date as to when you did this.
Yes, ma'am, I noticed that too, and Mr. Haven, we don't know. We just got it from the Board of Elections.
Is it on the computer downstairs?
The date that it was processed, it would be.
Okay.
Mrs. Waldrop, it would have to be, because it has the 17 Palmer Street address on it, that was the Franklin Motel time that the Haven family lived there, which was from September 2009 through April 2011. So my guess was that it was during that period of time, since it has 17 West Palmer Street.
So the address has not been changed to
Well,
the budget motel?
look at the, Ms. Waldrop, look at Exhibit 2A, and that's an example of how the Board of Elections changed the address from the Franklin Motel to the Budget Inn.
Okay.
When Mr. Haven moved to the budget, back to the Budget Inn, and needed to vote absentee in the 2012 primary. See how it's dated April the 19th, 2012? Yes, ma'am. I think that explains that.
Okay.
That's why we provided it.
I understand that.
Yes, ma'am.
Other questions?
Anything else?
No, I don't have any.
One question, Mr. Haven. Your driver's license shows 431 East Palmer, and your Board of Elections registration shows 433. Could you explain why there's a difference of 2 days?
What it is, there's one mailbox there at 433 at the main office. These apartments are numbered. Now, I do have a photostatic copy of a title that is to my personal vehicle, which I could get it and lead me to there. That is addressed 433 East Palmer Street, and under it says 431.
So if I understand, the mail is delivered at 431 or 433 into that single box. Is that what you're telling us? I do have another question, but I swear I don't know how to ask it, because I think it's been asked and answered. if I understand, with that challenge was signature and filing it with the Board of Elections.
Now, I looked over the information, and I said, you know, why is this being done? And I asked for the research information, et cetera, that had been used, photographs that have been taken, and I said, you know, is this the properties involved? And once I had that, it was to my satisfaction that the information was correct. Because I did not have the wherewithal or time or whatever to do the research myself.
But Mr. Duval was the actual author of the challenge.
Yes.
I would call to the board's attention that the testimony was that he did not know the author of the document.
Okay, okay. That's what you testified, correct?
Well, he compiled it, and I'm sure there was some authorship there, but I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay. Any other questions?
When you moved from Mill Creek to Franklin, what was the date to the Franklin Motel? Was it in 2010,
No, it's 2009 in September.
2008?
Wait a
Wait a minute, she asked you when you moved from Mill Creek. Liz, answer the
No, I
question.
thought she was asking what time I moved into the motel.
There's a record being made, Mr. Hagan.
2003 was when I moved from Mill Creek, but I didn't move into the Franklin Motel then.
But when did you move into the Franklin Motel?
That's what I thought. It's September. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, September 2009.
And where did you move from into the Franklin Hotel?
On the page 10.
All right.
Any other questions?
All right.
Okay. At this time, we'll review the information.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
May we have an opportunity to make a brief statement?
Yes.
May I remain seated to make a statement?
Yes.
Regarding mail, I think that a lot of folks have had the experience that in Franklin, and maybe other places, but in Franklin, there's 911 addresses, and there's mailing addresses, and there's P.O. boxes, and lots of people have different addresses that are different. And it's a real challenge to sometimes just keep up with addresses for lenders and everybody that wants everybody to have an address. 911 addresses and mailing addresses are often not the same thing. Regarding the burden of proof, the burden of proof, and I think that the county attorney will confirm this, in this case is the preponderance of the evidence. That's not to be confused with the burden of proof that's something like the preponderance of the evidence just means the greater weight of the evidence. It does not mean, as in a criminal trial, evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. So when you're trying to carry a burden of proof where the burden is evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, you got to really tip the scales of justice. But when the burden of proof is the preponderance of the evidence, it just means you believe it a little bit more than the other one, just a little bit more than the other. And there have been a lot, and it's a chicken and egg kind of question that lawyers have discussed for years. So if you have the burden of proving something beyond, proving something by the preponderance of the evidence, you might as well say the other side has the burden of proving it by a preponderance of the evidence. Because just having a little more causes you to win. And I want to talk about the statute just a little bit so that there couldn't be any confusion about it. But under 163-127.5, which talks about what has to be proved by the candidate, the domicile, the testimony is that the domicile that he had when he filed for this seat in 2013 was the budget-in apartment. So the first domicile for purposes of the statute is the Franklin Motel. The Franklin Motel. The testimony, the unchallenged testimony, is that Mr. Haven moved from the Franklin Motel to the budget inn. So where it refers to the first domicile, we're talking about the Franklin Motel in Franklin, and the new domicile is the budget inn in Franklin. Mill Creek doesn't even come into play by the wording of the statute. And then the next thing that he has to prove is the intent to make the new domicile the personal residence, and Mr. Haven testified that it was his intent to live there, and the law of domicile is a place your domicile is a place you always intend to go back to. It's ancient English law, where a man goes back to his castle after he's been out fighting the wars for years, where he's finally going to go back to it and be buried. That's why I asked him that question, so that he could tell you and testify to you that that's not what his domicile is. And I think Mr. Jones would confirm that for purposes of this statute, residency and domicile are the same thing, coterminous. Would you agree with that, Mr. Jones?
I would let the statute speak for itself, and I think reading that, it was crystal clear that on the question of residency, you make inquiry as to domicile.
The stuff in the petition about the LLCs and all that is meaningless, irrelevant. It doesn't have anything to do with anything. Who owns the apartment that he lives in doesn't matter. The fact that it happens to be owned by an LLC that he happens to own is, I guess, evidence that it more likely is his residence, but it's really irrelevant and immaterial who owns it and what the addresses are on it. And the fact that one says 423, one says 431, and one says 433 is a smokescreen, because it's all talking about the budget inn and his apartment at the budget inn. And just a couple of cases here. Mr. Jones, Farnsworth v. the Gaston County Board of Elections. I would like, that would be 114 NC Act 182. And this is a case where the Court of Appeals said that the candidate did not have residence. And in this case, the candidate moved into a city election seat district within 30 days. And before the filing period, before he filed, he signed a month-to-month lease. It was a furnished apartment, and he told the landlord that he was moving there in case he won the election. The Court of Appeals said that's not residency. Now, that's one that's not residency. Here's one that is. And this is the seminal case in North Carolina written by Justice Susie Sharp, North Carolina Supreme Court, 1971, and it was Hall versus the Wake County Board of Elections, 280 NC 600. And in this case, this young lady moved from Tarboro to Raleigh to go to Meredith College. She was a freshman, and she went to register. And in the end, after it went to the Wake County Board of Elections and the Wake County Superior Court, it finally went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said that she did have enough connections with Wake County to be a resident for voting purposes. And being a resident for voting purposes under North Carolina law and being a resident for candidacy purposes is the same thing. There's no greater burden to be a candidate than there is to be a voter in a particular precinct. And here's what the court said. In this case, the plaintiff, that's the voter, left her parents' home in Tarboro to enter Meredith College as a freshman. The college sends her grades to her
Okay,
parents.
this time, I'd like to ask if there's anyone else present at this hearing that desires to present evidence on the issue of the challenge. Please come forward and do so.
My name is Jensina Crossman, and
You need to come up so we can get you in the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And you'll need to be sworn as well. Let's swear you in first, please.
Jensina Crossman,
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give to this committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may proceed, Ms. Crossman.
My husband and I owned Rainbow Springs Campground for 18 years, and we dealt with Appalachian hikers, and in Mr. Haven's behalf, I can say you have to be there 24/7 because you never know when a hiker's going to knock on your door. Secondly, I have worked with the Republican Party, and one time I happened to be in town working with Mr. Haven when he was running for commissioner the last time, and I had to use the bathroom. And his wife kindly let me go into the apartment to use the bathroom. I have physically been in the apartment. It has a kitchen, it has a living area, it has a bedroom, and it has a bathroom. And yes, people could live there and eat there.
Thank you, Ms. Crossman.
You're welcome.
Do you want to ask her? Did you have any questions for Ms. Crossman?
No, sir, I did not.
Thank you, Ms. Crossman. Is there anyone else? Seeing that there is none, at this point.
There is one.
It is, okay. Yes, you'll need to come forward and be sworn
Are we
in.
permitted to ask questions of Mr. NIchols?
No, they're permitted to testify.
All that's permitted is for testimony, but not question. Facts of the case. Is there anyone else? Okay. Seeing that there is no more, at this time, the chair will accept motions as necessary to accept facts and decision from the board. I'll assign a member to draft a written order with the decision. And Gary will ask Church to do that. And the member will seek the advice of the county attorney. Make sure that we've got the format right at this time. So, do we have any motions, discussions?
Well, I think the counsel for Mr. Hayden pretty much summed it up. Those three things that have to be proven by the challenger. And if any one of them is missing, then the challenge would be overturned. I think he did show, Mr. Hayden did show an actual abandonment of the Franklin Motel to the budget in. And that was his residence at the time when he registered to vote for a long period of time, well outside the 30-day period. He did acquire a new domicile by actual residence. That's supported by Ms. Crossman, not only her testimony, but Mr. Haven's testimony, plus the presence of his clothes, his toiletries, and even, yes, his cooking materials. So I think that shows that he acquired a new domicile. Intent is hard to prove or disprove, but I would take his word if his intention maintained that as his permanent domicile. And his actions also show that through a variety of things, going off on these various soirees on business and then returning to that location time after time, which shows intent. So I would say that the challenge has not been upheld and make that motion that the challenge by Mr. NIchols is not upheld.
Okay. Have a second of that?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. This time, we'll have that draft of the order. What would be in order this morning?
I think what you may want to do is you can keep your meeting in session, but obviously it's going to take a few minutes for me to work with your board individual to put together a draft, and we'll do that right now.
Yeah, we'll do it today.
Yeah, we'll just go ahead and do it. I have a laptop.
The decision is that the challenge will return. We'll do the
Based upon the facts, and we'll get that.
So we only have the courtroom until noon, and we have other business to conduct.
Do we need to keep this in session until that is?
Yeah, I think you can keep this in session, but if you want to go on with your other business in the interest of trying to move things along. As long as that place that you were going to commit is and you can utilize this as long as you need it.
Oh, okay. Okay, then we'll just work on it. This may take we're not adjourned. He has to get it over. No. You need to read that, state that.